On a freezing February night in 2018, a 20-year-old seasonal worker walked out of a house party in Sun Peaks, British Columbia, and never made it home. A short walk, a town of a few hundred people, and a disappearance with no trail, no clues, and no explanation. Welcome back to an all-new episode of Darkly Speaking. My name is Alex Kern, and before we jump in, I wanted to call out to a few listeners today. If you're tuning in from Kansas or Missouri, please take a second to rate the podcast 5 stars and drop a comment wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Tonight, we're going to Sun Peaks, a small ski town resort tucked into the mountains of British Columbia, Canada. It's the kind of place people go to breathe for a while, to work a winter season, snowboard, meet new people, and figure out who they're becoming before life starts demanding answers. And in February of 2018, that's exactly what 20-year-old Ryan Shtuka was doing. He moved to Sun Peaks with a friend, picked up a job on the mountain, and fell into the rhythm so many seasonal workers know: work, ride, repeat. It was supposed to be a good year, a reset, a chance to be young and free and a little unsure in a place that felt safe. But on one brutally cold night, after a bar outing and a small house party just minutes away from the place he shared with friends, Ryan stepped outside and never came home. This is the haunting disappearance of Ryan Shtuka. It's Friday, February 16th, 2018 in Sun Peaks, British Columbia, a tight-knit ski resort community where everything feels close and safe. People walk everywhere, most seasonal workers know each other by name, and the general vibe is that nothing really goes wrong here. Ryan and his friends, including his roommate James, are wrapping up their work week. They're kind of in that end-of-shift, end-of-week headspace where the only plan is simple: go out, relax, and shake off the week. Nothing about this night feels any different from the dozens they'd had before. Their first stop is a place called Massa's. It's a bar right on the resort. It's typical Friday night energy, seasonal workers finishing shifts, locals mixing in, people grabbing drinks and catching up. Ryan blends right into that flow. Nothing about his mood or behavior stands out. He's just out with friends, doing what everyone else is doing. After Massa's, the group walks over to Bottom's, where there's a silent disco happening. Everyone grabs headphones, the DJ's live streaming music, and the whole place has that insulated, goofy energy silent disco always has. Ryan, James, and the rest of their group are moving in and out of the crowd, talking, dancing a bit, drifting around. Exactly what you'd expect from a bunch of 20-year-olds on a Friday night. Again, nothing unusual. Bottom's closes around 1 a.m., but no one's quite ready to go home yet. They hear about a small get-together happening just down the hill, close to where Ryan and James live, actually, so it feels like an easy last stop before calling it a night. They grab a lift from the resort, hop out a little ways down, and walk the final stretch to the house. The whole move, bar to lift to short walk, maybe takes around 10 minutes or so. The house party itself is low-key, not wild or chaotic, just people talking, hanging out, drifting in and out of different rooms. I will note, however, that some of the reports call this a small gathering of around 30 to 50 people that came and went throughout the evening. However, in my humble opinion, I wouldn't consider that a small gathering per se. Nonetheless, Ryan is seen getting up at one point, but nothing about him draws any attention. No one sees anything concerning. Around 1:30 a.m., James decides he's done for the night. He gets up to leave and naturally assumes Ryan is coming right behind him. He'd literally just seen him stand up a few minutes ago. A few other people leave around the same time. The walk back is quick, maybe a few minutes tops. Somewhere along that short walk, the group realizes that Ryan isn't with them, but no one panics, and there are very real reasons for that. Ryan's almost 21, over 6 feet tall, strong, used to Alberta winters, and Sun Peaks is the kind of place where people genuinely feel safe walking around at night. There wasn't a "we all stick together" kind of plan because that's just not how most guys operate on a night out. And here's the part that's worth saying out loud. Women are taught from a young age that you don't leave each other. You do head counts. You wait for the slowest person. You don't go home without your friend right beside you. It's almost automatic. But that same culture doesn't really exist for men. They're not taught to keep track of each other in the same way, and socially, it's not expected of them. And even though statistically, it's more dangerous for women to be out alone, and that's absolutely true, no one ever talks about how men can also be vulnerable. In fact, according to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, men make up a larger portion of missing persons cases overall. It's just not a conversation people have, especially not on a normal night like this. So, from the group's perspective, nothing felt off. Nobody could have known something was wrong. The assumption was simple and completely reasonable. He either stayed behind for another minute, or he's a little ways back and will walk through the door any second. No one calls or texts him right then, and to them, that makes sense. In this environment, nothing about that moment feels alarming. But Ryan never walks through the door. There are no footsteps behind them, no messages, nothing. And by morning, when he still hasn't shown up, that routine, Friday night, suddenly feels very different. By sunrise, the uneasiness sets in. Ryan's roommates check his room, empty. They check his phone, ask around, retrace what they can. That sinking feeling starts to build. A few hours later, Heather's phone lights up with a message no parent ever expects. Ryan is missing. The next day, Saturday evening in Beaumont, Alberta, about 40 minutes outside Edmonton, Heather Shtuka is on the couch with her husband, Scott. Their 2 daughters, 18 and 12, are home too, just doing their own thing. It's an everyday, quiet, normal weekend night. Ryan, their 20-year-old son, hasn't lived at home for a while now. He's spending the winter working at Sun Peaks, living with his friend James. Everything about this night feels ordinary. Heather is mid-text conversation when a notification pops up from James. She sees his name, but she's in the middle of finishing another message, so she swipes it away with the intention of checking in on it in a second. Nothing about it feels urgent. It's just another notification. When she finally taps back into the message, it takes a second for her brain to catch up to what she's reading. At first, it just doesn't make sense. James is saying Ryan didn't show up for work, he's not answering his phone, they're worried, and they've already filed a missing persons report. She should expect a call from the police at any moment. It hits out of nowhere, devastating information arriving in the middle of an otherwise quiet evening. She calls James immediately. She's trying to put pieces together, the simplest explanation, something that makes sense, something that makes this make sense. Maybe he stayed with a friend. Maybe he slept in. Maybe plans changed. She's asking questions and troubleshooting the way any mother would. James tells her what the last 24 hours looked like from his side. When he went to bed the night before, Ryan still wasn't home, which wasn't unusual necessarily. People in Sun Peaks crashed with friends all the time, stayed out late, or ended up at someone else's place. In the morning, Ryan's bed was still empty. Again, not necessarily strange. James assumed he'd see Ryan at work or somewhere on the hill, or that he'd be back at the house by the time everyone else got home. But Ryan never showed up for work, and he wasn't home that night either. That's when the normal explanations stopped making sense. Heather continues asking more questions. Questions any mother would ask. Did you check this place? What about that one? Could he be here? Could he be with someone? But James and Ryan were still new to Sun Peaks, barely 3 months in, and James didn't know all of the people, all of the spots, and all the possibilities. Still, he and the others had checked what they could. They asked around, posted in a local Facebook group, called hospitals, and then, when things still didn't add up, they called police. While Heather is still on the phone with him, Scott reaches out to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They're told a canine unit is already searching the area between the house party and Ryan's home. If the unit doesn't find anything soon, a full search and rescue team will be out at first light. It's clear this is already serious. Far more serious than Heather realized when she first saw James's name, pop up on her phone. There's simply nothing more they can do from Beaumont, so Scott's mother comes over to stay with the girls, and by around 10:30 p.m. that night, Heather and Scott are already on the road, heading straight toward Sun Peaks. By the time they leave Beaumont, search teams are preparing for sunrise on the mountain. From this point on, the certainty they'd relied on is gone, and Heather and Scott are stepping into a reality no parent is ever prepared to face. Sun Peaks is small, not just in the way resort towns are small, but genuinely compact. In 2018, the entire community had around 600 residents. It's a ski resort, the kind of place where people feel comfortable walking everywhere because everything is close by and usually predictable. The house party where Ryan was last seen is right around the corner from the place he shared with James. Depending on which path you take, the walk is anywhere from a few minutes to around 15 minutes. In a town this tight, a disappearance like this just doesn't make sense on a surface level. There just isn't room for someone to vanish, and the question people always ask, why didn't anyone go back for him? It sounds obvious until you understand the weather that night. It was brutal. Around negative 20 degrees Celsius, it was absolutely frigid, the kind of cold that cuts through you immediately. And when you're drunk, exhausted, and freezing, the only thing anyone's thinking about is getting home as fast as possible. No one is stopping, no one is doubling back. Everyone is focused on getting indoors before the cold becomes dangerous. Even Heather has said it before that she doesn't blame the friends for not doubling back, because in those conditions, no one is lingering outside. Everyone is just trying to get home. Meanwhile, Sun Peaks is nearly a 9-hour drive from Beaumont. As soon as Heather and Scott hear that Ryan is missing, they get in their car and drive. The drive itself feels endless. Because, well, it is. Hour after hour of dark highway, stopping constantly just to breathe and gather themselves before continuing. Every time they pull over, they're left with the same thought. How did things end up here? Their 20-year-old son, who'd only wanted a winter of snowboarding and a break from figuring out his next move in life, is suddenly missing. On that drive, they're thinking about everything that's led to this winter. How Ryan sat them down months earlier and said he wanted to work a season somewhere, anywhere, just to reset. He'd tried construction with his dad. It wasn't for him. He tried a year of science in university. Also not the right fit. He didn't want to spend money or time on a path he just wasn't sure about. Snowboarding, being in the mountains, figuring himself out, that made more sense to him than anything else at the time. Heather and Scott understood that, and now, somewhere between Alberta and British Columbia, they're replaying all of it. Around 2 a.m, Heather finally connects with the police for an update. After that, nothing. No calls, no messages, just hours of silence from the authorities as they continue driving. And when you're the parent of a missing child, that silence becomes deafening. I can't even imagine the thoughts that turn over in their minds, but I'm sure that every mile becomes harder than the last. Heather and Scott reach Sun Peaks at around 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Fresh snow blankets everything. Normally a dream for a ski resort, but a major problem in a missing person search. More than 8 inches of snow had fallen since Ryan was last seen, on top of an already deep snowpack. Footprints, any sign he might have left behind, anything that could have guided them, all likely buried. Fresh snow complicates aerial searches. Drones, helicopters, and overhead surveys lose visibility. Tracks and prints aren't clear, but deep snow isn't all bad for search teams. Large disturbances can still show up beneath the new layer. An indentation, a fall, something dropped that creates a small rise or bump. And deep snow helps search teams stay organized. Their own tracks become markers, showing where they've already searched so they don't duplicate ground. By the time the sun rises over Sun Peaks that morning, Heather and Scott aren't the only ones bracing themselves. Search teams are suiting up to cover a landscape that changed overnight. And the first real clues are about to come from the snow itself. The official search for Ryan begins early on the morning of February 18th. Search teams move straight to Burfield Drive, the exact street where the house party was held just hours earlier. It's the logical place to start. If Ryan left that house intending to walk home, that stretch of road and the area surrounding it is the most important ground to cover. All through the previous night, while Heather and Scott were driving towards Sun Peaks, police had already brought in canine units. Those dogs searched around the party house and along the most likely routes home, but they never picked up Ryan's scent at the party house at all, and the initial flashlight and voice call search from volunteers didn't turn up anything either. There's also no physical proof of placing Ryan inside the house party. No photos, no videos, nothing captured on anyone's phone. The last known photo of him is from the silent disco earlier that evening. But everyone who was there says he was at the party. His friends, the people who saw him stand up before leaving, others who talked to him. There's never been any dispute about that. Police don't question his presence there. Their working assumption has always been the same. He was at the party and he left sometime between 2 a.m. and the following morning. Police are honest with the family right away. They tell Heather and Scott that if Ryan was injured or unable to move somewhere outside in those temperatures, the odds of surviving 2 nights in the cold are extremely low. But low isn't zero, so the search continues at full force. So on a map, the area between the party house and Ryan's home looks tiny, just a few blocks. 2 small clusters of houses separated by what appears to be a short strip of woods, but the terrain is more complicated than it looks. There are no sidewalks, no streetlights, sharp slopes, buried shoulders, and snowbanks several feet high. The wooded patch that looks like it could be walkable in the summer is a completely different animal in February. Thick underbrush, downed branches, deep snow, and hidden pockets of terrain. There were realistically 2 paths Ryan could have taken. The shortcut through the woods, the fastest line between the 2 houses, but extremely dangerous in the winter. Or the longer, safe route along the roads. The safe route meant walking down Burfield Drive, turning onto Sun Peaks Road, and following it to his house. But even that path is also difficult at night. Walking directly on the road, similarly with no lights, 6-foot snowbanks, slippery shoulders, add alcohol, subzero temperatures, and that urgency to get home, and taking the shortcut suddenly becomes a choice that's easy to understand. Search and rescue teams spend the entire day covering every inch of the area. They move along Burfield Drive, down Sun Peaks Road, through the woods between them both, and into the open space on either side. They use everything available: snowshoes, foot search teams, snowmobiles, drones, and helicopters scanning for any disruption in the snow. They're not only looking for Ryan, they're looking for absolutely anything that could suggest he'd even passed through. Clothing, a dropped item, a single footprint, even the smallest indentation. They push through almost 18 straight hours of searching. 22 trained search and rescue volunteers, 74 community volunteers, multiple canine units, and police teams all working the same tight radius again and again. And after all of it, nothing. No Ryan, no clothing, no belongings, not even a partial track or a faint print. The snow around the area is completely undisturbed, as if not a single person had walked through it. Just before midnight on Sunday, February 18th, search officials suspend the operation. Nearly 48 hours have passed since Ryan was last seen. In temperatures this extreme, the window for finding someone alive has essentially closed. Heather and Scott are devastated. Ryan still hasn't been found. To them, giving up simply wasn't an option, when every parent instinct is telling you to keep going. And when a search this large covers every inch of terrain and still finds nothing, the questions start to change. If Ryan didn't make it down the road and didn't make it through the woods, then where did he go? The suspension of the official search applies only to Kamloops Search and Rescue, not the RCMP investigation. Police make that clear right away. They're still working the case, following leads, and prepared to keep it as long as necessary. Search and Rescue also say they'll come back the moment new evidence points them somewhere specific. The search hasn't ended in spirit, it's just shifted. With no organized search and rescue team left on the ground, the search naturally transitions to Heather, Scott, and the volunteers who begin showing up. They build everything themselves: a Facebook page for updates, media outreach, and a reward that starts at $5,000 and eventually grows to $15,000. And unlike the official search, which focused only on the area between the party house and Ryan's home, the family widens the scope. Because the question isn't, where is he now? It's also, where did he actually go when he walked out of that house? Police interview everyone who was at the party that night. Everyone agrees Ryan was there, but here's the difficult part. Not one person remembers seeing him leave. Not a single person recalls him saying he was stepping out. No one remembers the moment he disappeared into the night. It wasn't a huge party, but it was busy enough, and everyone was drinking. Some were using drugs, and some were mixing both. That combination muddies timelines quickly. No one is being dishonest necessarily, but memory does get fuzzy in environments like that. Whether Ryan himself had used anything that night is unclear. Heather said it's possible, but there's no detail beyond that. So the question becomes, what if he didn't walk toward the house? Behind the house party isn't a simple shortcut. It's dense forest, steep and deep, and far more dangerous than the small wooded patch between the two homes. Searchers likely pushed into that area briefly during the first day, but no one mapped it thoroughly. It's not the most likely scenario, but it's one of the only unexplored directions he could have gone. The thinking starts to broaden. If he didn't head toward the home and he didn't cut through the woods, could he have gone a different way entirely? Wandered by mistake, aimed for another spot? Maybe he just wasn't heading home at all. And whatever direction he chose, he didn't make it there. Police and the family put out a wide appeal to the public. They ask residents to check their sheds, outbuildings, garages, cars. They ask for any potential sightings after 2:10 a.m., the earliest point he could have left the party. And they ask people to review footage of every kind: security cameras, dash cams, trail cams, anything that might have captured Ryan or any vehicle or person moving around in those early morning hours. And that's when someone reviewing their footage finds something. Not Ryan, not a sighting, but something that leads investigators toward an entirely new line of questioning. Police turned to the resort's camera system first, hoping something in the village might have shown Ryan walking around after he left the party. Sun Peaks only has a handful of surveillance cameras, a couple monitoring the road into the resort and a few near the village walkway. In theory, if Ryan had headed that direction, one of those cameras should have caught him. But when police reach out to the resort operators for the footage, they hit a dead end. Some cameras weren't recording, others weren't even working. Some had already overwritten the footage from that weekend. Whatever the reason, nothing usable exists. What police do get is a public tip. Someone believes they saw a young man matching Ryan's description walking along Fairways Drive around 1:55 a.m. That area is closer to the village, not on the route toward his house. At first, this doesn't fit the timeline at all. Everyone assumed Ryan was still at the party at that time. Then, investigators learn about a text message sent to one of Ryan's roommates the night of the party. Now, here's where it gets frustrating, because the contents of that text message hasn't been made public. But the implication is that Ryan may have left earlier than everyone thought, around 1:30 or 1:40 a.m. No one seems to know who sent the message or why it didn't surface sooner, but if that timestamp is correct, then the 1:55 a.m. sighting on Fairways Drive suddenly lines up. That raises the next question, though. Why would Ryan be walking toward the village at all? Well, you see, there's a popular pizza place in the village that stays open until 2 a.m. on weekends, and it is packed with seasonal workers grabbing something warm after a night out. After drinking, after standing in the cold, it's not all that unreasonable to think that he might have headed that way instead of going straight home. Police check every digital activity they can: his phone, his bank statements, social media. They report nothing. No calls, no messages, no transactions. They never confirm any purchase at that pizza place, and if he did go, he could have paid in cash. Nonetheless, there's simply no evidence that he ever went to get pizza in the village that night. Then, months later, in May of 2019, Heather and Scott learned something they hadn't been told. Ryan's phone pinged at 3 a.m. on Saturday, February 17th, an hour and a half after the last moment anyone thinks they saw him. The RCMP never released any details about where the ping was, how strong it was, what direction it pointed to, or whether anything else was attached to it. It adds another massive unknown into an already fragile timeline. With no footage, no confirmed transactions, and a phone ping that goes unexplained, investigators are left with fragments, pieces that don't fit neatly together. And what comes next shifts the investigation again, not toward evidence, but toward possibility. By the end of May 2018, after months of living in Sun Peaks, Heather and Scott make the painful decision to return home to Beaumont without Ryan. Their daughters still need them. Life at home can't stay paused forever. They promise themselves they'll come back every month to keep searching. Leaving without their son isn't something they ever imagined doing, but they don't have another choice. Up to this point, the possibilities have centered around a few ideas. Maybe Ryan cut through the woods behind the Burfield house. Maybe he tried the shortcut through the smaller wooded patch between Burfield and Sun Peaks Road. Maybe he headed into the village for food. But once the organized search ends and there's still nothing concrete, investigators and the public start widening the lens. If he didn't walk home, then what else could have happened? One theory people bring up is the possibility of a hit and run. The roads around Sun Peaks have no sidewalks, limited lighting, and high snowbanks. The idea is simple. An impaired driver hits Ryan, panics, and removes him from the scene. But even in heavy snowfall, a fatal impact leaves evidence. Blood, torn fabric, something dropped in the snow. Search teams found nothing. No drag marks, no disturbed snow, nothing to suggest a collision. Another theory is that Ryan overdosed at the house party and people panicked. Drugs were present that night, and no one has publicly said which ones, but the theory assumes that someone at the party hid his body to avoid consequences. The issue is the terrain. Dragging or carrying a 6-foot, 180-pound person through deep snow would have left a visible trail. Search and rescue searched the area in a tight grid, documenting every footprint, every break in branches, every tire track. There was nothing. Then there's the uncomfortable question. What if Ryan never left the house at all? No one actually saw him walk out. Aside from the unconfirmed sighting on Fairways Drive, everything after about 1:30 a.m. is guesswork. The dogs never picked up a scent leaving the house. Even more frustrating, there is no public record confirming what investigators did inside that home. But with the unit cycling through multiple tenants over 7 years, if something had happened there, it's likely someone would have found something by now. Another possibility people raise is that Ryan left Sun Peaks entirely. But nothing about his life points in that direction. He had no legal trouble, no known substance issues, no documented mental health conditions. The day he disappeared, he paid his bills, picked up his paycheck, and went out with friends. Not the kind of behavior of someone preparing to vanish. Still, he was 20, and that age can bring unexpected internal struggles, and police appear to have considered it, but nothing public supports the idea that he chose to leave. The hardest part is this. After 7 years of searching, tips, interviews, and grid sweeps, the RCMP have never shared a working theory, not publicly, not privately with the Shtukas. There's no preferred explanation, no leading scenario, not even a direction they're confident in. The truth, based on everything available, is that investigators genuinely do not know what happened to Ryan. And when a case reaches this point, no body, no evidence, no confirmed route, you are left with one question that becomes impossible to ignore. How does someone vanish in a community this small? And why, after all these years, does the trail still feel like it never existed at all? When volunteers search for Ryan in Sun Peaks, they often leave behind a small green dinosaur with the missing tag attached. It started out as something personal, something Heather brought with her in those first few days of searching, when everything felt unbearably quiet and impossibly cold. Over time, that tiny dinosaur became a shared symbol across the community, a marker of love, hope, presence, and the promise that Ryan will never be forgotten. In the early days of the search, Heather wrote about how disorienting those first few nights were. The fear of knowing her son was out there somewhere, the silence that settled over everything, and the heaviness that grew with every hour that passed without answers. In that same message, she shared a memory from Ryan's childhood, his love for dinosaurs, how he'd tug at her sleeve begging to play dinosaur games, how she and Scott learned paleontology terms just to keep up with him, and how those small everyday moments became the memories she clings to now. She used to end their nights with the same gentle invitation, "Let's talk about dinosaurs." That simple, tender phrase became the heartbeat of the very symbol searchers now carry. Heather has also written 2 books, each one carrying Ryan's legacy in a different way. Missing from Me is her memoir, a raw, honest account of losing a child, continuing the search, and trying to survive the impossible. It isn't a true crime story. It's a mother's grief laid bare and the strength it takes to keep moving. Her second book, Let's Talk About Dinosaurs, is for children. It shares Ryan's love of dinosaurs in a way that encourages kindness and connection. It's gentle, hopeful, and offers young readers a way to understand Ryan's memory through something joyful instead of frightening. The Shtuka family keeps Ryan present in every way they can. Their posts link to the short documentary Peaks and Valleys, to both books, and to the Shtukasaurus, the green dinosaur symbol that's become part of the search itself. They are pieces of Ryan's life that continue to move through the world. Ryan Shtuka was more than a missing person case. He was a son who once stayed up late talking about dinosaurs, a friend who chased adventure in the mountains, and a 20-year-old who should have made it home that night. Sun Peaks has searched for years: helicopters, drones, cadaver dogs, dive teams, and a community that refuses to let go. And still, there are no answers. But that little green dinosaur keeps appearing on the trails, a reminder that Ryan is remembered and that his story hasn't faded, that love persists in places where answers haven't. Heather and Scott believe that their son is still somewhere in Sun Peaks, and until they find him, they will keep searching. For them, and for so many families still waiting, hope isn't naive, it's necessary. And if you're listening from Sun Peaks, if you've hiked those trails, if you lived there in 2018, and you know anything, even something you brushed off, please come forward. Because the only thing harder than someone out there holding back the truth is the possibility that no one knows anything at all. So please come forward for Ryan, for his family, and for every person out there still waiting for the truth. That's all for today's episode. If you have any information about the disappearance of Ryan Shtuka, please contact the Kamloops RCMP at 250-828-3000. If you'd prefer to remain anonymous, you can submit a tip through Kamloops Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 or online at kamloopscrimestoppers.ca/submit-a-tip. These resources will also be available on our website, darklyspeakingpodcast.com. And be sure to follow along on socials at Darkly Speaking Podcast. Thank you so much for being here, for listening with empathy, and for holding space for Ryan and his family. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.